It begins with beauty, always with beauty. That is how the darkness enters now, not through terror, but through wonder. Once upon a time, evil came with fangs and fire. Now it comes with a frame and signature. It smiles from gallery walls, glows in digital screens, and hums in the background of modern culture. You will not fear it, because it will not frighten you. It will mesmerize you. That is how witchcraft has evolved from ritual to aesthetic, from blood to brushstroke. It no longer summons demons. It seduced disease. Man was created to reflect glory, but when he forgot the giver, he began to worship the gift. The artist once painted to reveal the divine. Now he paints to replace it. He no longer says, "Thy will be done," but "My vision be seen." That is the first spell of modern witchcraft, the deification of imagination. Art has become altar, and the artist, priest. But the God he serves is not light. It is the self, and the self, unchecked by truth, will always become a tyrant. The first artist, the one whose name you know, whose exhibitions fill cities, embodies this tyranny of the self. His paintings dazzle, but they do not heal. They pulse with energy, but not with peace. Look closely, and you will see it. Faces without souls, eyes without direction, beauty without humility. This is the art of possession, not demonic, but psychological. The canvas is not an offering. It is a mirror, demanding the world to see its maker and call him God. Every stroke says, "Worship me," and millions do. They call it genius. But genius without gratitude is witchcraft brilliance that bends light toward ego until truth disappears beneath design. The second artist paints chaos and calls it freedom. He tells you that beauty is oppression, that order is a prison, that all forms must fall for the spirit to rise. But spirit that rejects order becomes shadow. He is the prophet of confusion, the preacher of entropy, the high priest of anything goes. His work vibrates with power, but not purpose. And those who stand before it feel liberated, yet hollow. That is the second spell. Freedom without form. For creation without creator becomes corruption. Even the stars obey structure. Only rebellion calls its chaos divine. Then there is the third, the one whose art feels like magic itself. People describe it as transcendent, mystical, enchanting. But look long enough, and the enchantment becomes eeriness. His paintings glow, yet the light feels cold. His figures rise, yet their eyes are empty. He paints not to praise, but to provoke. He seeks the sacred without submission, the supernatural without sanctity. His art is a seance, summoning awe without truth, mystery without meaning. That is the third spell. Mysticism without morality. It feels like heaven, but leads to nowhere. The fourth artist is subtler still. His art is beautiful, tender, full of feeling, and yet it drains you. It glorifies sadness until sadness becomes an identity. He paints despair with such skill that people confuse it for depth. He has turned melancholy into religion, pain into poetry. And while sorrow can indeed be sacred, this sorrow refuses resurrection. It romanticizes ruin. This is the fourth spell. Suffering without salvation. The heart that feeds endlessly on despair begins to mistake emptiness for insight. And finally, the fifth, the darling of modern culture. His paintings shimmer with glamour, luxury, perfection. Every stroke flatters, every color flatters, every line flatters. It is worship of the material masquerading as mastery. It sells the illusion that beauty equals worth, that aesthetics equal virtue. But his beauty is not truth, it is temptation. This is the fifth spell, pleasure without presence. Beauty detached from goodness becomes idolatry. When art serves desire instead of destiny, it becomes witchcraft, the kind that smiles. These 5 artists are not evil men. Most of them do not even know what they serve. They are victims of the same enchantment they cast the spell of self-sufficiency. They believe that light can exist without source, that inspiration can thrive without humility. But all light, unanchored, eventually burns itself out. What begins as revelation ends as ruin. You see, witchcraft is not the worship of demons. It is the worship of will. It is the belief that creation can exist apart from Creator, that art can be holy without holiness. And this is why so much of modern beauty feels hollow. It impresses the senses, but does not awaken the spirit. It inspires admiration, but not repentance. It moves emotion, but not eternity. Because true art, like true faith, must wound before it heals. It must break pride before it builds purpose. The difference between divine inspiration and witchcraft is simple. One humbles, the other inflates. One draws man upward to awe, the other inward to arrogance. The artist who paints in the name of truth bows before his gift. The artist who paints for fame bows before himself. Both produce masterpieces, but only one leaves the viewer freer than before. And this is where our age stands in galleries of glittering spells, staring at canvases that claim to liberate while they enslave. The witchcraft of modern art does not curse you. It comforts you into blindness. It whispers that beauty is its own justification, that meaning is whatever you feel, that morality is outdated. But beauty without truth becomes seduction, and meaning without morality becomes madness. Yet hope remains, for the same imagination that can curse can also consecrate. The same hands that paint pride can paint praise. When art remembers its origin, it becomes worship again. When the artist remembers he is not God, he becomes godlike. For humility is the gateway to inspiration. Gratitude is the true muse. So let the galleries be full, but let them be honest. Let the artist confess that his light is borrowed, that his talent is a trust, that his creation is a conversation, not a coronation. When art bends back toward its maker, it no longer enchants, it enlightens. Because the truest miracle of art is not that it makes us look at the world differently, but that it makes us look for the divine again. And when that happens, when brushstroke meets reverence, when talent meets truth, the witchcraft dissolves and the light returns home. The world has always confused power with purpose. It always has, from the moment Lucifer said, "I will ascend," to the moment the modern artist whispers, "I will create without consequence." But art, like all creation, was never meant to ascend on pride. It was meant to kneel in praise. The paintbrush was not given to invent gods, but to remind men of grace. The tragedy of our age is not that artists no longer believe in God, it is that they no longer believe beauty needs him. They think the divine has grown obsolete, that the sacred has gone out of style, but beauty without holiness is merely decoration for decay. It glitters for a moment and then fades, leaving behind a soul starved of wonder yet full of noise. And yet even now art can be redeemed. It can still remember what it was meant to be, a window, not a mirror. The redemption of art begins not in technique, but in truth. It begins when the artist realizes that his talent is not possession, but participation. That every stroke, every note, every sculpture is not invention, but reflection, a dim echo of the voice that once said, "Let there be light." When that light enters again, even the darkest palette can burn with grace. To redeem art is not to censor darkness, but to illuminate it. The true artist does not hide shadow. He reveals what the shadow hides. He paints not to glorify despair, but to expose it to redemption. Every painting becomes a prayer. See, Lord, this is the world as we have broken it. Make it whole again. The greatest art is not entertainment. It is intercession. It pleads for meaning in a meaningless age, for reverence in a reckless one. It whispers through color and form that beauty still believes in goodness. The world calls that naive, but naivety in its purest form is faith uncorrupted by irony. The cynic sneers because he fears. He fears that if beauty is truly holy, then he must bow again, and pride has forgotten how to bend. So he mocks the sacred to feel strong. But every time he does, his laughter sounds a little hollower. For no man can mock heaven without hearing his own echo in hell. I do not despise the modern artist. I pity him. He stands before his canvas like a priest before a silent altar, longing for revelation, but finding only reflection. He hungers for transcendence, but his palate is filled only with ego, and still deep down he knows there is something more. That is why his art aches. Every line he draws, every image he conjures, is a cry, is there meaning left? He would not paint at all if he did not hope the answer might be yes. And so the redemption of art begins where all redemption begins. In humility, when the artist stops shouting and starts listening, when he lets the brush move slower, as if in prayer, when he paints not to be seen but to see, in that quiet surrender art returns to its rightful place as language for what words cannot bear. And suddenly, what once carried witchcraft begins to carry worship. But this transformation is not limited to galleries and museums. It belongs to every life that dares to live creatively, every conversation, every act of kindness, every choice to build rather than destroy. Each of us paints something on the canvas of time. Some paint pride, others mercy. The question is not whether you will create, but what spirit you will invite into your creation. You see, the devil does not need to destroy art. He only needs to distract it. He whispers that beauty is enough, that meaning is irrelevant, that truth is oppressive. But the soul that believes him becomes restless, because art that glorifies the self can never satisfy the self. It feeds the appetite, but starves the spirit. The only art that truly endures is that which serves something higher than applause. So let the artist pray again. Let him stand before his blank canvas and say, "Not my will, but thine be done." Let him create as though eternity were watching, because it is. Let every brushstroke be a confession, every color a hymn, every form a fragment of faith. Then, and only then, will the dark forces lose their hold. For light does not argue with darkness. It simply enters. Perhaps you are not a painter, yet you too create with your choices, your words, your love. You too shape the atmosphere around you. You too decide whether your art, your life, will reflect witchcraft or worship. You need no canvas, no exhibition. You need only honesty. For the greatest masterpiece is a life aligned with truth. The time has come for a generation of artists and ordinary souls who will use beauty not as escape, but as evidence. Evidence that light still triumphs, that hope still breathes, that meaning has not gone extinct. Art that does not seduce, but sanctifies. Art that heals without hypnotizing, that questions without corrupting, that provokes thought without poisoning the soul. This is not sentimental art. It is sacred realism. It looks at the world, wounds and all, and still dares to sing, "It is good." For the highest calling of any creator is not to impress, but to intercede, to stand between the darkness and the dawn, and paint the truth that will outlive both. To take what was broken and make it beautiful, not for profit, but for praise. And when the day comes that this kind of art returns, when beauty once again bows to truth, then even the galleries of hell will lose their glamour. The witchcraft will end, not with fire, but with light. The human soul is a mirror, reflecting not only what it sees, but also what it believes. This is why the artist's work is so powerful. It does not merely represent reality, it shapes it. Every stroke of the brush, every word spoken, every action taken, it all carves out the inner landscape of the soul. And if the soul is clouded by pride, fear, or self-worship, the art it creates will reflect that darkness. The mirror may shine, but it will not show the truth. It is easy to see this in the work of artists who glorify chaos, who revel in destruction, who paint despair and call it depth. They are not wrong in their observations. The world is full of brokenness. But their art fails to answer the question, what do we do with this brokenness? The paintings of destruction leave the viewer adrift, without hope or direction, as if chaos is the final answer to life's questions. The mirror reflects, but it does not heal. This is the tragedy of much of modern art. It holds up a mirror to the soul, but it does not invite the soul to change. It does not call the viewer to transcend the darkness it shows. It invites them to sit in it, to wallow in it. It tells them that this is all there is. That meaning can be found in suffering alone, and in doing so, it feeds the spirit of hopelessness, turning art from a tool of transformation into a trap of despair. But this is where the fire enters, the fire of redemption, of hope, of healing, the fire that does not burn for destruction, but for purification. Art, when it is true, is a mirror that reflects not only the world as it is, but as it could be. It sees the darkness, but it does not leave it unchallenged. It holds up a mirror to the soul, but it does not say, this is all you are. It says, this is what you can become. And art that heals does not paint the world as it is, but as it is meant to be. It does not reflect the despair of a broken world. It reflects the hope of a restored one. It invites the viewer to step into a different reality, to imagine a world beyond their pain, to envision a future beyond their flaws. True art does not settle for reflection. It reaches for transformation. It burns with the fire of truth, not to consume, but to purify. This is the light that has been hidden in the shadows of modern art, the fire of love, of truth, of grace. It has always been there, waiting to be rekindled. It does not shine by its own power, but by the power of the one who created it. The artist who creates with this fire does not seek to glorify himself, but to glorify the one who made him. His work is a humble offering, a reflection of the beauty and goodness of the Creator. And in doing so, it becomes a light that leads others to Him. When you look at art through this lens, you begin to see the difference between the works that carry witchcraft energy and the works that carry the fire of the divine. The former feeds the ego, glorifying the self and its desires. The latter humbles the soul, inviting it to rise above the ego and seek something higher. The former traps the viewer in the darkness. The latter invites them into the light. But this transformation is not limited to the world of art. It extends to every part of life. Every thought, every decision, every action we take is a stroke on the canvas of our lives. We are all artists, creating the world we inhabit with our choices, our words, and our actions. The question is not whether we will create, but what we will create. Will we create a world that reflects the darkness of our pride and fear? Or will we create one that reflects the light of truth and love? The fire of redemption is always available, always present ready to burn away the impurities that cloud our vision. But it is not a fire that consumes everything. It is a fire that refines. It does not destroy. It purifies. It does not erase. It restores. The artist who is willing to embrace this fire, to surrender to its purifying flames, will find that their work no longer glorifies the self, but the divine. Their art will no longer reflect the darkness, but the light. The mirror of art, when held up to the soul, should not simply show what is. It should reveal what can be. It should challenge the viewer to rise above their circumstances, to reach for something higher, to seek the divine in the everyday. The fire that burns within the artist's soul should not be a fire of self-interest, but a fire of self-sacrifice. It should burn away the dross of ego, leaving only the pure gold of truth. This is the path of redemption, not in denying the darkness, but in transforming it. Not in succumbing to despair, but in rising above it. Not in glorifying suffering, but in using it as a tool for healing. Art, when created with this intention, becomes a mirror that reflects not just the world as it is, but the world as it could be, a world filled with light, with love, with hope. And so I urge you, whether you are an artist, a creator, or a seeker, to look deeper. Do not settle for art that merely reflects the world as it is. Look for the art that challenges you, that invites you to rise above the darkness, that beckons you to step into the light. And when you create, create with the fire of redemption burning within you. Let your art be a reflection of the divine, a mirror that reveals not just what is, but what could be. For in the end, true art is not about the artist, it is about the creator. And when we create with his light, our work becomes more than art. It becomes a reflection of eternity itself. It becomes a bridge between the earth and the heavens, a testament to the power of redemption, and a reminder that, no matter how dark the world may seem, the light of truth can always shine through. There is a moment every creator knows, that pause before the final stroke, when the hand trembles and the soul wonders whether the work is finished or if something still breathes within it, unspoken. That moment, dear soul, is sacred. It is the breath between human effort and divine completion, between what is made and what is meant. And it is in that silence that truth speaks. You are not the artist alone. You are the instrument. For all creation begins in this realization. The sculptor, the writer, the painter, the musician, all must learn that they are channels of something greater than themselves. The power that moves through them is not theirs to own, only theirs to steward. The pride of man has always been to confuse inspiration with possession. He mistakes the flame for his own when he is merely holding the candle. The wise artist knows that if the flame is his, it will flicker. But if it is divine, it will burn even when he cannot see. The redemption of art is not the rejection of the self, but the restoration of its rightful place. The self is not meant to be worshipped but wielded. It is the brush, not the masterpiece. The self is not the sun, but the window through which sunlight passes. When the soul learns this, creativity becomes communion. The artist no longer paints for approval, but from adoration. The act of creation becomes prayer, not the prayer that begs, but the prayer that beholds. And what happens when the world begins to see art this way again? The witchcraft loses its spell. The works that once whispered arrogance begin to sing humility. The colors that once celebrated chaos begin to reveal cosmos order, intention, purpose. Beauty regains its baptism, and the gallery becomes a sanctuary once more. For art that glorifies God does not shrink the artist. It exalts him rightly. It lifts his hand toward heaven even as it humbles his heart toward the earth. But this redemption is not just for the painter or the poet. It is for you, the listener, the observer, the wanderer, who stands before the vast canvas of your own existence. You, too, are painting something every day with your choices, your words, your reactions. You are shaping the tone of your life with every thought you entertain. Your relationships, your work, your silence, all of it is brushwork on the portrait of your soul. What colors are you using? What light do you serve? There are still 5 artists within you, each one painting in their own way. The first paints pride, the desire to be adored. The second paints chaos, the refusal of order. The third paints mysticism, the fascination with power. The fourth paints sorrow, the worship of wounds. The fifth paints pleasure, the addiction to surface. And all 5 must, at last, lay down their brushes before the one true artist, the creator of all form and color and light. Only then will the masterpiece emerge, not from effort, but from surrender. For the soul that kneels becomes the soul that knows. Knowledge without reverence is witchcraft. Knowledge with awe is wisdom. The witchcraft of modern art does not curse you. It comforts you into blindness. It whispers that beauty is its own justification, that meaning is whatever you feel, that morality is outdated. But beauty without truth becomes seduction, and meaning without morality becomes madness. Yet hope remains, for the same imagination that can curse can also consecrate. The same hands that paint pride can paint praise. When art remembers its origin, it becomes worship again. Every gift misused becomes a curse. Every curse surrendered becomes a gift redeemed. If the enemy has hijacked art for his purpose, it is not to make beauty evil. It is to make it empty. Fill it again with meaning, and you will break his spell. Fill it with gratitude, and you will make it holy again. This is your call to true creation, to live and work as though the universe were watching, because it is. To love beauty not as a possession, but as participation in the infinite. To create not as rebellion, but as revelation. To let every action, every word, every piece of your life be a brushstroke in the painting of redemption. And when you doubt, remember this: no masterpiece is without mistakes. The difference between the artist and the amateur is not perfection, but persistence. The same is true for the soul. You will falter. You will mix the wrong colors, blur the wrong lines, ruin what once seemed perfect. But grace is the hand that repaints what pride has spoiled. Every failure surrendered becomes part of the final beauty. The cracks in your life are not flaws. They are where the light seeps through. There will come a day when you stand before the finished work, the portrait of your life, and you will see that every brushstroke had meaning, even the ones painted in darkness. The witchcraft that once blinded you will be revealed as preparation, the darkness as canvas for light. You will see that God was not absent in the chaos. He was composing through it. The fire that frightened you was not meant to consume, but to purify. The tears that blurred your vision were not punishment, but polish, making the glass of your soul transparent enough for his light to shine through. And in that moment, when you finally see, you will understand. The masterpiece was never the painting on the wall. It was the transformation within. You were the art all along, not the creator of it, but the creation of one who paints with eternity. The last brushstroke is not made by human hands. It is made by the same hand that drew the galaxies and carved the mountains. When it falls upon your soul, the colors of your life will align in a way you could never have imagined. You will see that every shadow had purpose. Every pain had precision. Every joy had design. The darkness that once disguised itself as witchcraft will now kneel before the light that never needed to shout to be real. And you will finally whisper, not to the world, not to the mirror, but to the Maker. Here I am, complete. For the truest masterpiece is not what you make. It is what you become. There is a light that does not fade. It burns quietly, without demand, in the hearts of those who have stopped chasing the applause of men and started listening for the whisper of eternity. It cannot be painted or performed, for it is not something you create, it is something you carry. The greatest works of art the world has ever known are not hung in museums, nor auctioned in galleries. They are the transformed lives of those who chose humility over vanity, truth over applause, reverence over rebellion. They are the living canvases upon which grace has left its fingerprints. The modern age has forgotten that kind of light. We have grown addicted to brilliance and bored of beauty, craving what dazzles but neglecting what endures. We call every flicker revelation, every shadow expression. But brilliance fades, only light remains. When the spotlight dies, what will you still shine with? When the crowd leaves, what will echo in your soul? These are the questions the modern artist, and indeed every man, must face. For one day, every masterpiece will be dust, and only the motive behind it will stand. The return of the light is not an event. It is an awakening. It begins the moment the artist looks at his creation and says, "This is not mine, this is borrowed." It begins when the soul learns to love the unseen more than the visible, when the musician no longer plays to be heard, but to be honest, when the writer no longer writes to be praised, but to praise, when the painter no longer paints to be immortal, but to reveal immortality. That is, when witchcraft ends, when the creation remembers its creator. You see, every dark force loses its power when you stop feeding it admiration. Vanity starves when you refuse to seek validation. Pride weakens when you choose gratitude. Envy dies when you celebrate others sincerely. The greatest exorcism is not ritual, but repentance. The most powerful spellbreaker is humility. The dark cannot live where a heart gives glory to another. This is the secret the tempter fears, that all the forces he manipulates are powerless against thanksgiving. So the artist returns to the light, not by destroying his art, but by redeeming it. He takes the same brush, the same canvas, the same gift, and uses it for glory instead of gain. His studio becomes his sanctuary, his work his worship. And though the world may still misunderstand him, heaven smiles, for creation has returned to its rhythm. The breath that spoke stars into being is now painting again through human hand. And this return is not reserved for the few. Every person can be an artist of the eternal. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every silent prayer of gratitude, these are brush strokes on the grandest canvas, the canvas of redemption. You do not need fame to create beauty. You only need faith. You do not need wealth to leave a masterpiece. You only need love. The man who lifts another out of despair has painted something far greater than oil on linen. The woman who forgives what the world calls unforgivable has composed a song that angels remember. The light returns through people like that, ordinary saints with unremarkable names, whose art is their integrity. They will never hang in museums, but their work will hang in eternity. Because God does not collect paintings, He collects people. He collects souls that choose to shine quietly when the world grows dim. He gathers them like stars, placing them in the dark sky of history, to remind the lost that light still lives. One day, when all the galleries have crumbled, when every brush stroke has faded, when the applause of men has gone silent, the true exhibition will begin. The Creator will unveil His greatest masterpiece, not a world of marble or color, but a kingdom of souls. Souls polished by grace, refined by fire, radiant with humility, and He will look upon His work and say again the words He spoke at the beginning of time, "It is good." Until that day, let us create. with reverence. Let us live as if our every word were a color, our every deed a stroke of eternity's brush. Let our hearts be canvases wide enough to hold both suffering and redemption. Let our work, whatever form it takes, be soaked in gratitude. For gratitude is the pigment of light. It turns everything it touches into gold. So paint your life in that color. Live so that even your shadows testify of light. Love so fiercely that darkness grows weary of trying to extinguish you. Create so honestly that heaven recognizes its reflection in your eyes. For the greatest magic is not witchcraft, it is wonder. The wonder of a soul fully alive, fully awake, fully aware that every breath is borrowed from something infinite. When the light returns, and it always does, it will not ask for applause. It will simply reveal what was there all along, the divine fingerprint in every hand, the eternal flame in every heart. It will remind us that beauty was never the goal, it was the guide. And in that moment, we will finally understand that the purpose of art and of life was not to create light, but to become it. And as the world fades to silence, you will hear it faint at first, but growing clearer, the same voice that spoke before the first dawn, "Let there be light." And there will be light, not in the galleries of men, but in the gallery of eternity, not painted on canvas, but written upon hearts, not the borrowed glow of fame, but the blazing truth of grace. That, my friend, is the end of witchcraft and the beginning of wonder. When all has been said, when the colors dry and the echoes fade, what remains is silence, not the silence of emptiness, but of awe, the kind that follows revelation, the kind that humbles every word, every gesture, every thought. It is the hush that falls when the soul realizes it has seen something holy. For that is what beauty was always meant to be, a doorway, not a destination, a whisper, not a boast, a glimpse of eternity through the thin veil of time. If you listen closely, you can hear it still, the faint pulse of grace beneath the noise of our age. It beats softly in the painter's studio, in the mother's prayer, in the craftsman's care, in the kindness of a stranger who still believes gentleness is not weakness. The world does not notice them, but heaven does. They are the quiet artists of redemption, shaping creation not with fame, but with faith. Their colors do not fade because they are painted with love. In this stillness, the soul begins to see differently. The eyes that once sought power now seek presence. The mind that once chased novelty now longs for meaning. The heart that once wanted to impress now desires to bless. You begin to realize that the truest art is not made by the gifted, but by the grateful. For gratitude turns even the smallest act into a masterpiece. The modern age worships expression, but forgets intention. It celebrates authenticity, but forgets accountability. It demands to be seen, but refuses to be known. Yet the soul that walks with the light has no need to shout. It glows quietly, content to reflect what it has received. This is not passivity. It is power without arrogance, beauty without pride, truth without spectacle. It is the kind of power that built galaxies and still bends to wash feet. C.S. Lewis once wrote that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. That is the secret of all true creation. The artist who forgets himself begins to remember God. The work that no longer serves the ego begins to serve eternity. And when the canvas of life is finally lifted to the light, it will reveal something no critic can measure: a heart aligned with heaven. This is the quiet victory over witchcraft, not a battle fought with spells or arguments, but with surrender, the kind of surrender that turns rebellion into reverence, the kind that stops saying, "Look what I made," and starts saying, "Look what was made through me." It is the restoration of wonder, the return of the childlike soul that can stand before creation and weep not because it owns beauty, but because it belongs to it. And so, dear listener, as the lights fade and the sermon ends, carry this with you. The world is still waiting for artists of light, not famous ones, not perfect ones, but faithful ones, those who will dare to create with conscience, who will let love lead their lives, who will let humility hold their hands. The darkness will not understand them, but it will fear them. For where they walk, witchcraft becomes wisdom, and beauty becomes prayer. If ever you wonder whether your work matters, remember this. No act of creation born from love is wasted. Every note of music that heals, every story that awakens, every color that points upward, they ripple through eternity. God does not forget the hands that build in his name. And when the final dawn comes and the light that began before time returns to claim its creation, every true artist, the famous and the forgotten alike, will stand in that radiance and see their work made whole. All the fragments of beauty they scattered across the centuries will gather into one great symphony of glory. The spell will break, the darkness will flee, and in that moment all of art will kneel, not in defeat, but in fulfillment. Because at last it will remember what it was always meant to be, not a monument to man, but a mirror of God. Then the light will speak once more, the same voice that spoke to the void, that whispered to the stars, that called still to the hearts of men. Behold, I make all things new. And as creation listens, as the final brushstroke glows beneath his hand, eternity will unveil its masterpiece, not painted on canvas, but upon the living soul of those who chose light over illusion, love over pride, truth over witchcraft. And it will be beautiful, quietly, eternally, beautifully so.